Hello, Debate Kansas City. Isaac here with you again. Today we're going to be talking about a new file that's just been released by Debate Kansas City. It is the Poverty Critique file, and I'm going to be taking you step by step through the criticism and just giving a brief explanation of the argument so that hopefully you'll be able to run it with some success at our debate tournaments. Alright, so like I said, this is the critique of poverty. What do we mean by that? This is specifically a critique that critiques the way the affirmative represents poverty or talks about poverty. In other words, every affirmative case is going to have some sort of justification for dealing with the issue of poverty. In that justification, they're going to present harms arguments. Now, the way that they construct or talk about these harms argument is what we are going to specifically critique. You're going to say that the way the affirmative team represents people in poverty is A, not the fact, B, is counterproductive, and C, should be avoided and rejected the way that they construct that harm. Let's take it step by step through each section or each card in the criticisms shell. Alright, so the first card is from Angelique Bates, who's a faculty at the Economics and Business and Government International Relations in the University of Sydney in 2007. Now, what she says in this piece of evidence is that the way we talk about the problem of poverty, we almost or do blame the poor for being in their particular situation. We do this in two ways. One, we say that they are either somehow different than an average person who doesn't live in poverty. They're deviant in some way, meaning that they break the law, or they just choose not to be part of normal society, or that they're just too ignorant or not smart enough to figure out how to be part of normal society. And that what we need to do, and what typically happens when we make these kind of claims, which are generally going to be in anybody's affirmative case, is that we think of the poor as different than us, or people living in poverty as different than us, and all they need is a social worker or teacher or someone to come in their life and show them the right path so that they are no longer poor. What this does, and what the argument here makes, is that when we view poverty as somewhat of a personal choice, either through ignorance, deviation, or difference, it doesn't allow us to look at some of the structural problems, some of the problems that are created by government policies or corporate policies. And so we don't end up blaming factors that create poverty. What we do is you end up blaming people in poverty for being poor. All right, so that's the first piece of link evidence. And let's move on and talk about the impact. Under the impact section of this criticism, there are two cards. The first one is from Helen M. Ingram and Ann Schneider, professor of social ecology at the University of California, Irvine. And this argument says that when we make these kind of representations of poverty, where we blame it on the individuals who are in poverty, it ends up creating a cycle where we actually don't solve poverty. We just end up blaming poverty on poverty itself, which means that the affirmative case, the way they represent the harms, they're not going to be able to solve it, because in fact the way they talk about it recreates the harm. This is sometimes known in debate as a harms replication impact. It's also a solvency takeout when you think about it. It's really important that you have this element here, because the affirmative team is going to try to answer this criticism saying that our affirmative case solves the problem of poverty. Your answer back would be like, no, it won't, because you continue to look at poverty in a wrong way, in a way that won't actually solve the problem and only serves to recreate it. Now, the second piece of impact evidence here is really important. It says that the only way we're going to change how we look at poverty and how we discuss about poverty is if we change it in debate rounds. This is an important impact for this criticism. It says that the way we speak about poverty, the way we construct those images in a debate round, are fundamentally and essential to actually changing the problem. In other words, what we say, what we do in this particular debate round matters, because it will change people's minds. It will alter the way we speak about people in poverty. This gives you an in-round real impact. Now, think about this in juxtaposition to the affirmative case. The affirmative case is an idea that the United States Congress and President should do. And while it may be a good idea, at the end of a round, there isn't actually going to be a policy. In other words, the affirmative case won't get done. It's just, we're kind of playing that game. unlike just playing a game, which is what the affirmative team claims, in this criticism we claim that we actually can reshape the discourse and the way we talk about poverty, which can have real-world impacts down in the future. So ultimately, at the end of the debate round, if you're running this criticism, you should be saying that this debate round right now is the most important thing, and that we can actually change people's lives. And change the way we talk about poverty, which is essential to solving poverty in the long run. So in other words, you do more to solve the problem of poverty by running this criticism than their imaginary plan to Congress or the president. Now, the last piece of evidence in this criticism is the alternative piece of evidence. And this comes from Larry Kate Baker, who's an associate professor of law at the University of Tulsa. And what he says is that we have to change how we view poverty. Instead of viewing them as responsible for their own poverty, what we have to do is see people in poverty as just like one of us, political agents like anyone else would be. We have to view them as equals, bring them into the conversation, and have a robust discussion about what are the government policies and or structural inadequacies in their area that lead them into poverty. We can't decide that for them or tell them that we can fix it with some sort of social worker or teacher. It has to be a cooperative approach to dealing with poverty, not a bifurcated or dichotomous approach, meaning that one group's over here saying this is how you solve poverty, and another group's over here saying we need help. You have to change that fundamental relationship between those two groups. You have to see those two groups as one and intertwined, and only until we do that will we be able to solve poverty. In other words, this has a couple of impacts that you really need to flesh out by the end of the debate round. One, why does the way we speak about poverty stop, or how does it recreate the problem? How does it ignore the structural issues that cause poverty year after year, decade after decade? Second of all, how in this debate, are we actually making it better, having a real world impact? And then lastly, the alternative, which is how we need to view poverty and how we need to have interactions with people living in poverty that are more equal and seeing them as political actors. If you do all three of those things in the debate round, it will be very hard to justify an affirmative ballot. This is also, you also think of this criticism as sort of a starting ground for many other criticisms of the topic. It really is just a lot of link work, and you could tail this into, say, a critique of capitalism, or you could tail it into a critique of the state. There are a lot of different critiques and critique impacts you could add on, or you could cohabitate very easily with this criticism. I suggest you go through, you read the file, you highlight it. As for notes on the affirmative, there is a front line. If you're on the affirmative and you run into this criticism, there is a front line at the end of this file that gives you some very good affirmative answers to the critique. I encourage you to explore that, highlight that, and put that together. I hope you enjoy the file. It's been great talking to you, and I'll see you at the tournament.